So much of my day is spent cooking and preparing meals for our family, so today I'm gonna bring you along on what a typical day of cooking and eating looks like in our family, and especially centered around using our AGA cooker. So one of my favorite features about the AGA is that it's always on. It's always hot and ready to go. And so the first thing I usually do every morning when we get up is I already have a made container of roasted vegetables, like a vegetable hash. So I take that out of the fridge and start getting that heating up in our AGA. And so we don't have a microwave in our house, so the AGA is really nice that I don't have to preheat it. It's already hot, and so I can just, anytime I want to warm things up, leftovers or whatever, I can just go ahead and put it straight into the AGA. Jim and I like to get up pretty early, around 5 a.m. when the house is quiet before the kids get up. And so after I get my breakfast going and heating, I'm gonna get a batch of yogurt started for today. So we typically make yogurt once or twice a week, and my favorite way to make it is in our slow cooker. That has just been my foolproof method, and I'll post the recipe to that below. After our yogurt is started, I'm gonna get a roast started. So today for dinner, we're gonna be having rice taco bowls. So rice with shredded beef and some avocado and cheese and sour cream and things like that. And so I'm gonna be using a chuck roast for that meat. So one of the awesome features about the AGA is that it has different oven compartments that are all set at different temperatures. So one of those ovens acts as a slow cooker. It's right around 200, 250 degrees, and so it's just the perfect temperature for a slow cooker. So I am chopping my garlic and my onions that I'm gonna saute in our Dutch oven, and then I'm gonna go ahead and sear that chuck roast. Searing is really helpful when you're cooking a roast to just lock those flavors in and make it as moist and juicy as possible. And so I saute our vegetables, I sear our roast, and then it's really nice because it's all just in this one Dutch oven. I can go straight from that to then just sticking it in the 200 slow cooking compartment of the AGA, and that's just gonna cook all day until dinner time. So we got our AGA in 2020, and prior to getting our AGA, I had no experience with them before. I had seen them and I thought they were beautiful and looked amazing, and they seemed really functional from what I knew, but I didn't have any personal experience using one or even knew of anyone who actually had one in real life. But when we bought our foreclosed home in 2020, and I knew that we were gonna be having to do basically a kitchen gut and remodel, I told Jim, I know this is a long shot and probably impossible, but if there was any chance of getting an AGA for our kitchen, that would be my dream oven. And so Jim is always up for a challenge, and so he started looking on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace and eBay, and actually found one just about an hour away from our house off Facebook Marketplace. And the woman that we were buying it from gave us an amazing deal to take this AGA out of her kitchen. She was renovating her kitchen and just wanted it gone. And so the most expensive part for us was hiring movers to get it moved out of her kitchen. And so that whole process was a little bit unnerving. I was a little not sure if we were making a crazy move to buy this, but we are so glad that we did. So along with the onions and garlic that I have in our pot with our roast, I'm just salting it really well, and then adding some seasonings. Like I said, this is gonna be used for making taco bowls, so I'm just adding some chili powder and some other kind of Mexican seasonings to that chuck roast that then I will shred at the end of the day when it's done for using in taco bowls. When the roast is ready to go in the oven, I'm gonna go ahead and open that slow cooking oven, and I actually had already been cooking some broth in that slow cooker all night. So like I said, the AGA is on all the time, which I think is one of the really awesome things about it. So oftentimes I will cook something all night long. Like tonight I was cooking a chicken feet bone broth all night, so that I started it at about 5 o'clock the night before, let it go all night, and now here I am at about 6 a.m. the next day, and I'm taking out that broth and I'm putting in my roast that we're gonna have for dinner. So today is Monday morning, and now that we're in December and it's the holidays, we have just had really full weekends. And so ideally, I would love to get some cooking done on the weekends and get some meals prepped and some bulk cooking done. But because we've had some extra things, our daughter had a violin concert and we had a community theater production that we went to and just some other things, we weren't able to get a lot of cooking done this weekend. So especially on full days like today where I know I'm gonna be doing a lot of cooking and things in the kitchen, I love to get a jump start early in the morning before our kids get up to get things going. So now that I have the yogurt going, the roast in the oven, I'm gonna go ahead and finish making my breakfast. So along with the vegetables that I roasted, I'm adding a little bit of liver pate, cooking up 3 over easy eggs, and adding a spoonful of sauerkraut to make that just a really nutrient-dense, packed breakfast. So the different plates on top of the AGA cookers are that plate to the far left that has the jars on it. That's called the warming tray. So we love to use that for drying dishes. Like I will often put our mason jars on there, as you can see, to just finish drying out instead of drying them with a towel. We don't have a dishwasher, so I'll just put them there to dry. And then the plate in the middle is called the boiling plate. So that's gonna be your hottest plate, and that's the one you're gonna use to boil things. And then the one that I'm using here to cook the eggs on, that is called the simmering plate. So that one's not gonna be as hot of a temperature, but it's good for things like cooking eggs or simmering. So after I'm finished making my breakfast, Jim comes in and makes himself some eggs. Our typical morning routine is that I'll make my breakfast, and then as early as I can, I try to get out and go for a walk outside before we do morning chores. So Jim stays in a little longer, eating his breakfast and holding down the fort. So Jim's typical breakfast is some scrambled eggs, and he likes to sprinkle on hot pepper flakes to his eggs. So the rest of us aren't crazy about hot, spicy food, and so Jim likes to take advantage of breakfast, which is usually the one meal that we're not eating all together as a family, to turn up the heat a little bit and make himself something that's a little more spicy than the rest of us would enjoy. So now we have finished our morning chores outside. We finished milking Thimble, our family milk cow. Our kids are awake, and now we are going to get going with our day. So our kids normally have scrambled eggs and yogurt for breakfast, along with maybe some fruit or granola or something like that. But today I have promised them that they can have eggnog for breakfast. So that is what we are going to do here. And I will post the full recipe for eggnog below, but I don't mind them having this for breakfast as a treat every now and again, especially here in the holiday season, because it really is a pretty nourishing recipe filled with egg yolks and eggs and raw cream and raw milk, a little bit of maple syrup. And so really it's not all that different from the scrambled eggs that they normally have and the yogurt they normally have with the dairy and the eggs for protein. So that is what we are doing here this morning for a little bit of a special treat. You can always make your eggnog by tempering your egg yolks if you want them cooked instead of raw. But because we know the source of our eggs from our chickens outside, and we know our milk and we trust all of that, we prefer just to make an easy raw version. So you can just whip this up in 2 minutes, essentially just by pouring all of the ingredients into a blender and mixing it up, and you have eggnog in no time. With 4 kids, 7 and under, our house and our kitchen can often feel really chaotic, and I will be the first to admit that I am often impatient and have a hard time including our kids in a lot of our daily kitchen things, but I really want to help them and encourage them to make recipes and be included in the process. And so when we are doing slower recipes, especially like this eggnog, it's really fun and they really, really love helping out as much as they can. And it's really nice. Our daughter is now getting to the age where she is old enough to help out. And so whenever I can slow down, get them involved, it's totally worth it. Our youngest daughter is now 8 months, and so she is crawling all over the place. She's pulling herself up to stand, and she is everywhere. So I often am wearing her these days because she's just kind of hard to contain, and thankfully she really loves to be worn. And so that is happening a lot right now, but it really helps make my life a lot easier, and kind of just the flow of our days go a lot better when we're not always asking where she is and what she's getting into. After the kids finish breakfast, Jim does violin with them for a little bit, and so our oldest daughter has been playing violin for a couple years now and is really into it, and then our second oldest has recently started showing interest in getting into it a little bit. So he'll practice the violin with them, which is nice because out of the two of us, Jim is way more musically inclined than me. He actually recently got his own violin and has started to practice with them as well, which is really fun. And so while they are doing that, it gives me a chance to clean up the kitchen, get all the dishes done, and get some other prep stuff done that I want to do. To give you a little overview on how the AGA works, so like I mentioned before, it is on all of the time. There are 4 different oven compartments, and they are each set at a different temperature. So the bottom left one is what I call a dehydrating or warming oven. So that oven is set between 100 and 200 degrees. It's cooler at the bottom. So at the bottom it'll be 100 degrees, at the top it's 200 degrees, and then above the warming oven you have your slow cooking oven. So that oven goes from 200 to 300 degrees. That's where we're slow cooking our roast right now. And then on the right side there is the baking oven that goes from 300 to 400 degrees. And then above that on the top right is the roasting oven that goes from 400 to 500 degrees. So probably my favorite thing about the AGA is that you can do so much at one time. So I can be dehydrating some herbs while slow cooking a roast, and then baking something in the 300 oven and roasting some vegetables in the 400 oven, all at the same time at all different temperatures, and it just is always on and it's always able to do that. I'm going to go ahead and strain the broth that I had taken out of the oven earlier now. Strain those chicken feet out. I try to make a batch of bone broth at least once, if not twice a week. And so I try to incorporate broth at least once a day in our meals, whether that is from a soup or a stew or using it to cook like rice or quinoa or grain. I try to incorporate it in some way in our diet every single day. And while using chicken feet for making broth isn't the most appetizing to look at, it does make the best broth in the world. And I've actually found that you can use the chicken feet even 2, if not 3 times and still make a really rich gelatinous broth. Kind of usually by that 3rd time you start to lose kind of some of that gelatin and collagen, so that's usually when I am done with them, but you can definitely use them more than 1 time to make broth. I'm going to get some Dolce de leche started here this morning. So every December, I like to make a big batch of Dolce de leche, and this is just what we have on hand for having as hostess gifts or giving to friends and neighbors throughout the holiday season. So Dolce de leche is a great way to use any extra milk that you have. So I usually make a half gallon at a time, but you could certainly make more than that if you had a big enough pot. But it's basically just the process of cooking milk and sugar together, dulce de leche, and boiling it down until it gets to be a really rich, caramely, thick sauce. The process to make dulce de leche on our oven usually takes about 2 hours start to finish. And so especially at the beginning here when you're getting it going, I like to make sure I'm checking on it regularly and stirring it regularly so it doesn't stick to the bottom of our pan. After Jim finishes doing violin with the kids is when we usually get into doing our homeschool routine. And so today, because we are making this dulce de leche, we are gonna go ahead and sit in front of the AGA to do our homeschool stuff. And that is just one of our favorite places to be in the winter time. The AGA always radiates heat, and so you will often find us in front of the AGA reading books in the winter time, or Jim and I, after the kids go to bed, like to sit there and have what we call little AGA dates, because it's just like the coziest little spot to sip a cup of tea and just chat. So it's just one of our favorite spots for our family to hang out. For any other homeschool families out there that might be wondering what we do for curriculum, we are using All About Reading for our reading curriculum, which I really love. We've been using that for about 3 years now. And then for math, we are using Simply Charlotte Mason Math. So another thing about the AGA that's just different from a standard oven is that when you have the boiling plate and the simmering plate open, it just is gonna lose heat over time. And so when I'm making the dulce de leche here, that boiling plate is gonna lose a significant amount of heat over the 2 hours that it takes to cook that dulce de leche. So it's just something to keep in mind that it's not gonna be as hot after an hour as it was when it started. As the dulce de leche is finishing up here, I'm gonna go ahead and start prepping for lunch. So like I said, we had a really full weekend, and so I wasn't able to do a lot of cooking, but one of the things that I did was pull out a ham that we have been enjoying all weekend long. And so we recently got a pig butchered from a local farmer friend, and so I like that ham is just super easy. It's already smoked and ready to go. So we used that this weekend to make some potato ham soup and a egg casserole with ham. And now I'm gonna use the little bit of leftover ham that we have to make these ham and cheese grilled cheese sandwiches. And while we like to do as much as we can on our homestead, I have just found over time, as our family has grown and my capacity has shrunk in some ways, that there are just certain things that I cannot get to. And so one of those is sourdough bread. So recently that has been something that we have bartered with from a local friend who makes the best sourdough bread. And so we have enjoyed getting a loaf of bread from him most weeks, and that's been really, really helpful. We don't eat a ton of sourdough in our house. Our typical is to do a sourdough pizza every week, and so we still make that. And then we'll do sandwiches, usually about 1 loaf of bread per week, and then that's it really in terms of sourdough. I try to focus on getting protein and veggies for most of our meals, but every now and again, once or twice a week, it's really nice to be able to just make something quick like sandwiches, and everyone really enjoys them. We are also in a homeschool co-op that meets 1 day a week, and so tomorrow is actually our last meeting of the year for this year. So we have a potluck, and I am supposed to bring a fruit salad to that. So I'm going to go ahead and prep the fruit salad, get some pineapple cut, get some grapes ready, and we will be able to use a little bit extra for our lunch today to go with these sandwiches. Our dulce de leche is just about done now. You know that it's done when it starts to coat that spoon and it turns that deep brown caramely color. We like to have this dulce de leche on hand, ready to go for just easy gifts if we have a party to go to, or for friends or neighbors. And so I like to put them in 1 cup mason jars. So I have found that a half gallon of milk used to make dulce de leche makes roughly half of that of the actual finished product. So about 4 cups. So I'm splitting it here between 5 1-cup jars, and that's perfect. So I like to store it in the fridge, and it will keep in the fridge for several weeks. So everyone loves getting little tastes of this because this stuff is amazing. It's super, super good.
This is your last look. Everyone gets one more.
Now that the dulce de leche is off of the stove, I can go ahead and make our grilled cheese sandwiches. And like I mentioned before, with having the boiling plate open for that long, it has lost a considerable amount of heat. So normally these sandwiches would crisp up really quickly on the boiling plate, but because the boiling plate has lost a decent amount of heat, they're not quite getting to that grilled texture and color that I'm looking for, but they're still gonna be good. And as long as I have it on there long enough, that cheese is gonna melt and it's gonna be yummy. After we finish eating lunch, our kids move into a quiet rest time. So our youngest 2 take naps after lunch, and then our oldest 2 do a quiet rest time. So usually that's listening to audiobooks or playing with Legos or magnet tiles quietly, something that's low key and quiet. And so this gives me a chance to either get some work done or to kind of crank out a bunch of stuff in the kitchen, which is what I'm gonna be doing here today. So I'm gonna be working on some bulk food prep. So I'm gonna be making some granola here, and this is my favorite way to use up egg whites that I have left over. So this morning when we made our eggnog, I used 4 egg yolks for that. So I have 4 egg whites left over, which is exactly what I need for this granola recipe. So this is my favorite way to use up any egg whites that I have from making ice cream or eggnog or putting in smoothies or something like that. I often find that we have some leftover egg whites to use. The egg whites in this granola recipe are awesome. They help give it a really nice crunch and just add a little extra protein to the granola. So this is a really easy recipe. It just uses coconut oil and oats, brown sugar, cinnamon, and then your egg whites. And I like to get the 1 degree organic, glyphosate-free soaked oats. Those are my favorite to get. We get those at Costco, but this is just the easiest 5-ingredient granola recipe that comes together in no time. So we're gonna bake this in the 300 oven for about 30 minutes, and then after it's done in the 300 oven, I like to move it down to the dehydrating oven or that 100 oven for another just hour or so to just let it finish cooking, make sure it's nice and crisp and crunchy. After that granola is in the oven, I'm going to go ahead and prep our Spanish rice that we're going to use for our dinner, to have those rice bowls that I mentioned earlier to go with that chuck roast that's in our slow cooker. As you can see here, I'm chopping up more garlic and leeks, and that's just basically a staple for us. I feel like garlic and leeks or onions are just kind of the base of almost every savory dish that we make. It just really helps add both flavor and nutrition, and so we go through a ton of garlic and onions. So I'm gonna start our Spanish rice with sauteing those together, and then I'm gonna add about 4 cups of the broth that we made earlier. And so I love to cook our rice in broth. I always try to have it on hand for that, to add that extra minerals and nutrition. And then I'm gonna add just about a half a cup of tomato sauce, some chili powder and other Mexican seasonings, and then 2 cups of rice. After the broth gets to boiling on our stove, I'm gonna go ahead and transfer it then to the 200 oven with the roast that we have cooking. One thing that I was pretty concerned about when we got our oven was because of the shape of each of the oven compartments, I was worried that we wouldn't be able to cook that much in them. And while they are less wide than your standard oven, they do fit a lot of stuff. So they are the shape is just different than your standard oven that's a lot wider, but each oven compartment in the AGA is really, really deep. And so you kind of just have to adjust the pans that you're using. So we cook with a lot of Dutch ovens. I use my 9x13 glass baking dishes a lot, or you can use the rimmed cookie sheets. The only thing you really can't use in the AGA are just the really wide cookie sheets or baking sheets, but anything that's not gonna be super wide will fit fine. But because the oven is so deep, it gives you a lot of that extra space. So like in our 200 oven here, I can fit both a pretty good sized Dutch oven that has our roast cooking, as well as this smaller pot that has our Spanish rice, and they both fit fine together in that 200 slow cooking oven. Our granola is cooking, our Spanish rice is in the oven, and then the last thing that I want to tackle this afternoon is getting a bunch of veggies roasted. I like to cook a bunch of bulk vegetables at least once or twice a week to just have on hand for my breakfast that I have. So I turn them into like a veggie hash that I top with eggs every morning for breakfast, but then I also like to have just roasted vegetables on hand as a quick and easy side if we ever need them for a fast meal. My favorite combination lately has been doing a butternut squash or two along with some beets and Brussels sprouts. I love this combination together, and these are just perfect fall veggies that we have on hand right now. My favorite way to cook roasted vegetables is to melt some fat in a pan. So I usually use lard. That is just our cooking fat of choice, but melt some fat in a pan and then add my vegetables in a single layer in a baking dish and then cook in as hot of oven as I can. So I will put usually one rack in the 450 oven and then the other rack below that in the 400 oven. And for butternut squash, I'll roast that for a good 35-ish minutes, depending on how small I cut the butternut squash. Our Brussels sprouts are pretty tiny here. They're the ones that we grew, and so those only need about 15 minutes. For beets, I like to slice them pretty thin. That's my favorite way to eat roasted beets, is to slice them thin and then roast them for about 15 or 20 minutes until they start to get even just a little brown and crispy. They're really, really yummy that way. Our granola is done. Everyone's starting to get up from their naps, and so we are approaching dinner time here. I'm going to try to finish up what I can in the kitchen and get dinner on the table. So now that it is winter and it is getting dark so early, I found that our family is just really changing based on the seasons. And so in the summer, we'll often eat dinner much later, like 5:30 to 6 p.m. And then our kids will go to bed, maybe 7:30 or 8 o'clock. But now that the days are so much shorter, it's getting dark by 4:30, 5 o'clock. We'll often be eating dinner around 4 or 4:30, and then our kids are getting down for bed at more like 6 to 6:30. And it's not really anything that we are doing intentionally. It's just what feels right with the seasons and just the way that our days have been going. Whew, okay, we got our veggies done. Dinner is ready. We got the rice out of the oven. We got our roast is done. I'm gonna go ahead and start shredding that along with our rice and our beef. We're gonna serve this with some shredded cheese, some avocado. We have just a very few last remaining ripe tomatoes from our garden. So we're gonna cut those up to add to our rice bowls, and some homemade sour cream, and that's gonna be dinner tonight. So thanks so much for coming along with us for our day, cooking meals in our kitchen. If you have any questions about our AGA or anything else that we do, feel free to drop them below in the comment section. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.